Welcome to The Lumber Word, where industry veterans Matt Beamer, Greg Riley, and Ashley Buckhold dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends, sharing our trading expertise to benefit everyone in the supply chain. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions that guarantee to make you wiser about all things lumber.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The Lumber Word, where we talk every week about everything related to cashless commodity lumber, CME lumber, lumber North America, Europe, anywhere in the world. This is episode 89. We're recording it on the 21st of August, 2024. And we have our great reoccurring guest, Russ Taylor from Russ Taylor Global. Welcome back, Russ.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Great to be here.
Before we started recording, I was just talking about how we talked to the people in Vancouver about we're excited, Matt, Greg, and I, about coming up there. And I guess we're doing our show live at your Global Wood Summit in Vancouver at a luncheon. So
exactly, over the lunch break.
That's great. That's
You probably get a lot of people that sometimes it's the second lunch, and a lot of times people are a little tired of talking to people. They just want to take a little bit of a break over lunch, and now they got you guys to entertain them and or wake them up and give them sobriety or whatever it is, right? So that'll be good.
Will there be any alcohol involved in that one or not?
I'm a big fan of second lunch, second dinner, second breakfast.
So it's the second lunch, so they will have already eaten once and then they're going to eat again?
Well, yeah, okay. Day two.
Day two. Okay, day two. Yeah.
Well, gotcha. Okay, well, let's talk about the Global Wood Summit. Russ, throw it out there. How do people? When is it? What's going on? How do they get a hold of you, and who should attend?
Yeah, so it's October 29th and 30th with also the evening of the 28th. We have a little reception, and we're talking about the global wood markets, the global wood trade, something that I used to do in my old company, and it's not being done anymore. So a lot of people have been asking, can you bring it back? Because we'd like to hear people talk about what's going on around the world in one event. So, this time around, we've got like over 30 speakers. We're going to cover international markets with speakers from like Japan, China, Chile, New Zealand, Russia, Scandinavia, Central Europe. And then we're going to have some other speakers talking about timberlands in the Southern Hemisphere and other places. And then we'll have a kind of a deep dive on the US and Canada and also on BC. A lot of people don't know really how bad BC is. So we have a great speaker on that. So all the topics we're covering are, it's lumber, mainly lumber, but OSB, pulp and paper, timberlands, wood chips, mass timber, lumber futures, and then logistics as well. So all in one. And then the icing on the cake is the Lumber Word podcast. So there you go.
That sounds great. And then what's the website people go to?
Yeah, and it's just www.globalwoodsummit.com, or they can go to my website too, Russ Taylor Global, and it's on there too.
That's great. Well, we're looking forward to it.
We've got really great faces for a podcast. We'll have to see in person how we stack up. Matt, let's we think you want to like dazzle them with our brilliance, or just baffle them with our BS up there. What do you think?
With our bullshit?
Yeah.
No, I just think that we just need to go, just be ourselves. We'll let you be the face man there, Greg. All 62 years.
Since it's going to be day two, we'll be armed with a lot of really in-depth information about the global timber supply demand balance, and I think it's really great timing, Russ. They're deep in kind of mid fourth quarter as people are trying to think about what's going to happen in 2025. Will we be able to talk about the election the following week? Will we be able to do that?
It's your program. You can go out on a limb all you want.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see on that one. Let's go at the market, Matt. You mentioned something interesting before we got on. You're like, it's been an interesting few weeks, right? And it has been. Greg and I just landed yesterday. We were up at corporate HQ up in Montreal for a day and a half, and came back. And the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, the market has just pricing, volume. I know in what we trade has kind of been climbing the wall of worry a little bit. And it's interesting.
When did you call the market bottom, Ash? When was that you called the market bottom?
5 weeks ago, maybe.
I mean, don't we want to mark like the day and the time? You know,
No,
it was like.
I'm curious, Ashley, what do you mean by the wall of worry?
Well, I think when I was looking at it 5 weeks ago, one of the reasons I've never felt so many people so negative on the market in every node of supply and distribution. And fast forward to right now, hey, I think our government did a good job hiding the recession from us, right? We're
Did you see they're revising job growth down by 1 million jobs?
Exactly. Yeah. We're revising everything.
I mean, it's like, yeah. You know, we've been saying it was like we have all these jobs, but actually we created 1 million less. Really?
So what I mean by it is, like 4 months ago, we already were talking on here about how we felt the big box stores were down because we were seeing a lot of their product offered to us that they normally see, and it was pushing back in the chain. So the big ones come out, they're the two biggest consumers of lumber in the U.S. probably, and said that they're going to be down somewhere between 4% and 6%, but that was already baked into the cake, I think. Mm-hmm. Multifamily, as Greg was talking about in the last show, was still bad, but it's starting to maybe get better. And then everybody that I talk to, when I talk about lumber prices, say, hey, but there's no demand there. I'm like, well, okay, let's throw demand off to the side a little bit and talk about supply right now. So there have been some items like 2x6 has moved $100 1,000 in the last 4 or 5 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. 2x4 is getting dragged along. Other wides are up. 9-footers are tough right now because multifamily type of business, and they're one of the higher produced items. But man, I mean, I know Greg and I every week have an amount of lumber we want to sell on trucks, and used to take us 5 days to do it. We hit it in 2 days this week. We were selling lumber sitting up in Montreal on our laptops, and we just kept saying yes to everybody. And like, we're selling distribution we don't normally sell. We're selling all over the place. People, if you say no to a counter, they're still sending you PO. So I feel like we're kind of in at least a little part of the market that I see is taking a lot of wood. The other thing I noticed, everybody is still keeping one of the lightest days of inventory they have, and they haven't changed it yet. And add to that 4 billion board feet potentially annualized taken off the market so far. And then kind of a shocker seeing some southern pine mills come off when for 10 years people said that you'll never go below the cost of production on pine, right? So I add all that up and I see the market continuing to move higher.
I think you're pretty accurate here with your assessment. It's interesting that without communicating between the two of us, because we haven't talked about our week so far, I'm actually having a pretty busy week also. And I've actually solved all my inventory problems that I've been talking about for the last 5-6 weeks. Those are all done now. And so I'm just now at the point where I'm waiting for wood to arrive so I can satisfy the next layer of demand. And I don't want to keep pre-selling inventory because I'm so far in the hole right now waiting for this stuff to arrive that I'd rather just wait for it to arrive. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, Matt.
So as a distributor / trader, I'm being more patient than I was a week or two ago. And it when you tell somebody, no, I can't do it, then all of a sudden they just either cough up a PO or they go look somewhere else and see if they can get a different answer. And that's fine. That's exactly what I want. My inventory is relatively low, and I don't have any real desire to go out and dump any specific lengths or any specific items right now. So I like the market as it sits today. I'm also cognizant of the fact that we've gone up on 2 and better, like 2x4, 2 and better, 2x6, 2 and better. Let's say $80 to $100 from the very bottom prices that we were willing to take on, say, July 15th.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me that wants to make sure I keep selling and capture these higher prices. But I'm also not buying as much inventory going into the fall as I would have going into the spring, right? So the pressure that I felt to sell lumber is gone. And I'm just going to be kind of like you guys, just following the ebbs and flow of the market. But I feel like right now that there's definitely an increase in demand and there's definitely a decrease in supply. And the people that have wood on the ground are going to probably benefit the most from that. If the rail strike turns into anything serious, which I don't think it will, but let's say it does. Let's say it's a 3 week.
I thought we said we weren't going to talk about the rail strike.
I don't really want to talk about it because it doesn't matter to me. But if it becomes more serious, then it'll matter to more people.
Matt,
And
great.
so
That's a great point. And I still don't feel a sense of urgency from customers. We kept talking for the last 4 weeks. Hey, if somebody comes in and pads their inventory by 2 weeks, we could move $50 or $100, $1,000, right? Nobody's padding their inventory. They're still keeping 30 days or whatever they are, the low amount on the threshold that they normally carry.
they're not going to change their behavior.
What I like is, why would you buy? Hey, the CN's going to go on strike, so I'm going to buy cars from a mill to ship from the CN. I'm like, well, like if they don't go on strike, well, then did you buy them because you needed them, or did you buy them because I'm getting back to my whole thing. The history of rail strikes in Canada has been an absolute zero.
Right.
Zero. Maybe this time's different. I don't know.
No, I think the market, it doesn't really care, as evidenced by the futures market dropping 20 points in 2 days. Like, the market doesn't care about the
and it shouldn't. It shouldn't
it's
care.
already priced it in, right?
Yeah, it's good.
I think the market cares more about all the curtailments that have been announced here in the last month, and actually the fact that we're starting to see yellow pine curtailment for the first time ever, right? Like in a long time. So the market's more cognizant of those two things, and so the rail strike, I don't. I just discount it. I think the market has discounted it at this point, but it still could be a problem, right? If this went on for 3 or 4 weeks and they just embargoed lumber coming across the border, then it would have an impact on Hampton, right?
But that's not going to happen. So, the most that's going to happen is, if it doesn't get settled tonight, it'll get settled over the weekend or early next week. There's going to be some minor disruption because of the things they've done in front of this, but it's too important to the economy of Canada to have it be an impact. They're saying that they want it, but they can't. Russ, would you chirp in here? Ash, I said we weren't going to talk about it now.
Well, I was just going to add in exactly what you just said, Greg. The economy can't afford it. It's too in Canada. So the government's come out and said, we're not going to arbitrate, which means they are going to arbitrate. That's always what it means. It's a matter of when will they arbitrate. And, so it's just a matter of, after 10 days or so, they'll arbitrate and put it all back together. That's my sense, because it's too expensive for the economy, which is fragile right now, to afford a strike. So I think that's my sense of it all. It's never a big deal, because governments always do what they say they won't do, and they're going to arbitrate.
Exactly.
That's a good. Just real quick on pricing. I heard today, Matt, Western spruce, I don't know, 500 Chicago. Does that sound right?
Maybe for just like average stock, that probably is accurate for the nicer wood that we're producing. We're getting 515, 520. Of course, the tally makes a big difference, right? If you got a bunch of 18s and 20s, that helps a little.
One of the things we always like to talk about when market moves is like, what inning are we in of the market move? Because it's a big difference if you were in the first inning, the week or two after Ashley called the bottom. We're going to just keep saying that for a long time. I'm going to be up in Russ. I'll be up there in Vancouver, and I'll go, so Ashley, when you called the bottom of the lumber market in July, what were you thinking about? No, but my point is like, so what week do you think we're in, Matt? What week are we in of the market rally?
Just based on the behavior of buyers and the mills, I'd say we're in the middle innings right now. I don't feel like we're at the end stage. So I'm
you feel like we're already in the fifth or sixth inning, you think?
I feel like we're in the fourth or fifth inning, maybe the sixth inning if you're real cynical. But typically there's going to be demand going into Labor Day and then out of Labor Day too. So I don't know. I like the market. I feel like I feel like the mills and distributors and wholesalers have a little bit of a moment to push back for the first time in many months. And this is their moment. It's going to last a little while longer. It probably go into mid-September, late September at this point, the way I see things. And, even having said that, I still feel like there's going to be trading going on. I mean, I like just because the market direction is up doesn't mean that there aren't negotiations on every transaction, right? So it just
Hey, guy
depends
countered me this
the item you're
afternoon.
talking about.
Guy countered me this afternoon.
It's just part of trading, right? So I like the market. I like the market for a little while longer here, and I'm just going to hang with it. The market could get a lot better. I'm discounting that idea. I think kind of 560, 580 on the futures board is a barrier, a big one to get through. And so I would be a seller at that point, not a buyer. Yeah, no, I definitely like the market right now, Greg. I think it's really the decrease in production has made a difference, and it's going to help anyone that's got wood on the ground here going forward.
I was just going to comment too. I did some analysis on the kind of where's the break-even cost of mills, and it's always so hard to know, a typical mill. But I looked at sort of the best mills, and looking at it today at current prices and factoring in the higher duty on Canadian lumber. Looking at that, I figured that the best mills in BC interior are probably -5 to -15% today margins at say the 375 current price of SPF, and Pacific Northwest green Douglas fir probably about the same. Looking at kind of the changes that the U.S. South, I think they're just moving into kind of like break-even-ish on average for the best mills, and then the best region of all though is the U.S. inland. Those prices are very strong, and I figure they're making about 5 to 10% positive margins. And so if your prices go up a little bit more, all of a sudden these mills are getting much closer to break even, and they have a little more confidence to keep running, and maybe curtailments are reduced a little bit as well. So that's the one thing about the supply side, is that as these prices go higher, will that sort of get more mills adding shifts or reducing curtailments, and then that could offset the demand balance that we sort of have right now, or the imbalance we have right now.
Right. So we're in a supply push market, Russ, which you bring up a really good point, which is why you kind of need to look at it and go, okay, supply push markets, they're going to hit an air pocket. They push up, and then when they fall, they kind of fall in a vacuum back down to whatever level they fall to. So I guess buyers, would behoove themselves to kind of stay in the same way that they have been, given when you look at the calendar. The market's seasonal low, and the market makes a seasonal low in Q4. We may have made a cycle low in July, right? So wherever this market goes to this week, next week, 3 weeks from Sunday, we're going to have a sell-off late September, October, November. We're going to have a sell-off. So then the question will be like, how close does a seasonal low get to the cyclical low?
Question for you, Greg and Ashley. Do you think that July at 418 is the low of the year?
Absolutely.
I do.
Done.
So do I.
Put in the book.
I think that was the low. Yeah.
I do. I think it is. I think you're dealing too now, Matt, on some of these prices that are moved, these 30, 60-day pricing, these guys give the home builders. I think you're seeing the first time in a while, some of these home builders are seeing higher prices, right?
How about the guys that are holding the paper on the second half of 2024?
Yeah,
at the old price.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that out there. I wanted to ask Russ too. So, these curtailments, they're talked about in the offices for quite a long time, I guess, before they even happen, right? And it's a lot. Like those two Southern pine mills they're shutting down. They quit taking log delivery. I'm obviously guessing those are high-priced mills. I think they were just bought within the last 2 years or something.
Yeah, maybe 5 years, but
5 years.
That's part of a package. Yeah.
So they probably aren't coming back for a while once they're down, right? I mean, that's my guess.
Yeah, reading between the lines, that's kind of what they sort of say indefinitely, and they're smaller mills and higher cost mills, and they can see that there's going to be it's going to take a while for all the southern yellow pine lumber to get absorbed in the market. So I think sounds like those are going to be going down permanently.
One of the interesting things,
those are 6 to 12 months curtailments depending on market conditions.
Right. That's 300 million board feet annualized, those two mills, right? So the thing I've noticed now versus my career in the industry, a lot of these curtailments, just shift changes at places, they don't make big announcements right now. They just do it. And I think that's smart, because I was talking to a guy on the phone before this, and it's like, why should they go out and tell the market? What are they getting in return for that, right? You just do it. It's like he said, it's like somebody countering you, and they're not going to give you an order, right? They're just doing it. And I think that caught a lot of people by surprise. All of a sudden they saw the list of everything curtailed. You made a comment that even if they get above the cost of production, that may give them some breathing room. I think some of these, don't you think there's already in the works? You mentioned BC, right, is a really tough area. I mean, I think you're going to continue to see some of those mills up there make announcements, unfortunately, over the remainder of this year, at least. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, for sure. In fact, I do a forecast with another colleague of mine, and we go through all the details in BC, and there's not enough fiber for all the mills. So we still figure another, 2 or 3 mills are going to close, along with, some probably wood pellet mills, probably a pulp line. It's all part of the reduced fiber until that fiber supply bottoms out, which is still a few years away, maybe even 5 years away. You're going to get mills starting to rationalize now rather than wait, and especially in these low prices and weak margins. And let's face it, these are the mills that haven't had a lot of capital invested in them, because they're the ones scheduled to go down anyways. So that's what I see. And BC is just, fiber isn't there. They're never going to get enough wood the way the government's operating right now. So they're in a tough pickle. So we'll see more reductions.
It's kind of shocking when you looked at the statistics in terms of how much BC production is down in 5 years. It's like over 50%, right? I mean, it's a 50% drop.
Yeah.
And how that's changed the dynamics of how the North American lumber trades. I mean, it used to be that, that was the buffer on everything. And they could crush the market. I mean, we highlighted, Ash, 2x6s. Why one of the reasons why 2x6s have gained so much relative strength is that that's a heavily produced BC item, not a heavily produced Eastern spruce item, and not a heavily produced European item.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, Russ, why is it that the Canadian government, which is in charge of all the provinces, is giving so much more, I guess, leeway to operate the business to the Eastern mills rather than the Western mills? Is there a reason that you can think of? Because they seem to really have it out for the Western mills, especially BC.
Well, forest policy is managed by the provinces, so they do their own thing. So the Canadian government doesn't really have any real impact, except maybe.
Yeah.
No, it's all provincial, and we have our government is all its voters are in the urban areas. They don't really care about the rural areas. They're not going to get them reelected. So they're you want old growth protected? Okay, let's do it. And boom, there goes the small communities. You want to have protect caribou. That is a federal initiative, but let's go do it early. And then all the First Nations stuff. I mean, BC jumped the gun on this whole UNDRIP UN regulation. For Indigenous people, they jumped the gun and started doing it before it was even approved by the federal government. They just said, let's give it all away to the First Nations because we have to. And BC was in the worst predicament for all of Canada. All the other Canadian provinces did some agreements early on, like 100 years ago. BC did nothing. And so now we're having to pay for it. And then they went on with landscape planning, getting the community more involved so that it takes longer to get cutting permits and reduce cutting permits. And I mean, I've got a list of about 20 items of what the government's introduced, and they all add up to this massive decline in available timber supply. And also, you just can't get access to it because of all the planning process hurdles you have to go through. So, some companies just can't get cutting permits, and that's why they're down. It's just utterly incredible if you're thinking that I invested in the province to create jobs and generate revenue and create some income, but I can't get the timber that's It's scarce, but it's not that scarce. We're cutting way below what the annual allowable cut is. Usually there's a gap anyways, but we're way below what we should be cutting. And that's all.
You're actually below the annual cut in BC right now.
Well, you're always below the
Yeah.
theoretical annual allowable cut. I mean, up until the beetle hit, we were very close. Cut the harvest and the AAC were very similar. But then when you had all this dead beetle that's still in the AAC, the annual allowable cut calculations, then there was a spread of about maybe, I don't know, 15% between the AAC and the actual timber harvest, because there's all this uneconomic timber in the calculation, and that's now dropped below. I think it's 50% lower now than it should have been, maybe only 15 or 20% lower. So this is lack of getting access to timber through cutting permits and going through planning processes is a real hurdle and making it really tough to operate in BC.
So I mean, it seems like this is a immovable object just kind of moving forward. Is there any coming back from this in BC?
I mean, you're kind of, the beetle is pretty much done, and now it's all these new policies that have to get settled in. And we see, looking ahead the next 3 or 4 years, it'll kind of trickle along for a couple of years and pick up a little bit, but it's never going to grow. You're going to have the odd mill coming back with an extra shift or here or there, but you have to get some mills out of play first before it can balance out. So it'll be never as big as it ever was. And, it takes, 80 years to 100 years to grow a tree. That's when we'll get more timber to harvest way outside of our lifetimes.
That's good. Matt, with Matt's, just to add on to Matt's question here, is logging and the mill business more friendly over in, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, those regions? Does that have a lot more ability, or are they at the high end of their cutting potential right now?
Well, again, these annual allowable cuts, which I always ignore, because what's really relevant is the economic sawlog harvest, and that's a much lower number. Mm-hmm. Most of the rest of Canada are close to those economic timber harvesting numbers, but the annual allowable cut numbers are quite a bit higher. So some of the forecasters out there talk about the AAC and other provinces, lots more timber. I go, no, there isn't. If it's not economic or it's not accessible, there's no roads or whatever. So it's only a number. But the sawlog harvest is pretty close to being maxed out across Canada. Ontario probably has the greatest upside. Quebec, I know, is tight. Alberta is going to probably have some reductions because they've got some caribou issues and some mountain pine beetle fall-offs to deal with. So they might slow down a little bit. But overall, the rest of Canada should be relatively flat to growing slightly.
Sounds like all the caribou migrate where all the progressive people migrate also.
Exactly.
What's interesting about this whole discussion, Russ, is that for all of my career, the Canadians and the U.S. has been fighting over taxes and tariffs and dumping and whatever you want to call it. And yet at the end of the day, it wasn't the U.S. government that is shutting down the BC and the Alberta. It's the Canadian government and the Canadian people themselves. It's like a self-inflicted wound. It's kind of sad, really. Especially when you're just look due south. If you live in Vancouver, BC, if you want to know what the end result of those policies is, come to Oregon. I'll show you all the shuttered sawmills and meth infused little small towns in Oregon that used to be timber towns, right? Now they're just meth labs. And so, hey, that's your future, BC. If that's what you want, I'll give you a tour. Fly down here. I'll drive you around the state and show you where you're going to be in 20 years.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was down in Oregon on a holiday in June and went to some of these smaller towns and even Northern California and saw exactly what you're saying. It was incredible. And it's a vibrant town that we saw maybe 20, 30 years ago. Yeah, it had changed dramatically. And I can see that happening in small town BC as well. No more jobs. What are the young people going to do? Well, not the things you'd be proud of, that's for sure.
So, I always thought that the BC government was pretty smart in that they were going to keep these mills running. I mean, like if you look in 2011, 12, 13, when things were really dire, they kept the mills running. And I'd always been told that it was because they wanted to have the tax base, right? So they support the people so that people end up paying taxes back into the treasury. Makes some amount of sense. And and apparently that idea is gone. So Too
Well,
bad.
that's changing government now, I think, right? Because that was the pro-business government. Now we have a kind of a anti-business government. So I don't know where they think the tax base is going to come from, but it's I think they're banking on like LNG ports and things like that, and things that maybe they're dreaming about a little bit. But the whole economy is definitely shrinking, and there's no master plan that I can see except get reelected, and that's the problem with with provincial government and public land is which was a real asset to mills when they came into BC 50 years ago. There was lots of timber available. It was a surplus, right? And then the beetle took away the surplus, and now we have governments not supporting the industry. So public land ownership is what we're seeing as a real negative rather than the positive was so many years ago. And that's why you see BC companies fleeing to the U.S. South, where there's lots of private timber, and they don't have to deal with provincial government policies on how they manage the timber and how fast they manage the timber. So they can set their own future, in other areas and not just in BC. Even Interfor going to Ontario and Quebec, that's a better environment than it is in BC for growth.
Hey Russ, one thing just while you're here and we can pick your brain on this one. So a couple weeks ago we had the new duty rates come out, and I think it's important for people to understand what they are now and what they will do to the cost of production over the next 2 to 3 years as they follow kind of the pricing and the market. What's the easiest way to explain that to people of how much percentage that'll raise in dollars per thousand some of the cost of production?
Yeah, well, the duty up until I guess this week or so was 8%, 8.05%, rising up to 14.5%. So an increase of 6.5%.
Mm-hmm.
That's about $25 a thousand on Western SPF and about $30 a thousand on Eastern SPF. That's a negative hit they got to take going forward. And the real scary part is when you look ahead to August of next year, that's when you do the calculations because of the weak markets 2 years earlier, relative to the period under review, expectation is those duties will now rise up to 30%.
Yeah. What is that at per dollars per thousand?
Well, it depends on the price, but that would be $100 a thousand. So,
I don't think most people realize that could be potentially added, in a relatively short period of time. Do you foresee that actually happening, or is there going to be some kind of negotiated settlement?
I don't think these things take forever. And I've talking to some people in the industry. They're saying, with the U.S. election, that means nothing will happen next year, and maybe the following year in 2026, something will start to happen. So, but practically speaking, I mean, who's in a hurry to negotiate this? Is it the Americans or the Canadians? If the prices are higher, which I think they will be in 2026, 2027, the pressure's off.
Right.
And so I don't know what the incentive is going to be, except this pot of money keeps growing. And then how that ever gets allocated back is a wild card. The previous precedent was 80% going to the Canadians. Well, will that be in play? I don't know, but that pot's going to be, about $9 billion Canadian right now, 7.5 billion US.
Is that a lot?
I think that's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So Russ, what other market forces do you see driving the market right now over the next 30 to 60 days and then through the end of the year?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of like what you guys are saying. I think prices are on a bit of a streak for a while. I think you will have a fourth quarter slowdown, but and the demand is not coming back. That's pretty evident. I mean, it's as the interest rates go lower, it's going to tick up a little bit, but getting the signals from Home Depot and Lowe's that there's going to be similar levels for the rest of the year. They're sensing that the interest rates are going to keep consumption low, and so you're looking ahead to next year as to how quickly can things pick up and. Canada's already had 2 interest rate reductions, and probably a third one in September. So the U.S. should probably start following along too, and that's all going to help. But that all takes time. So my sense is, you're not going to get any real strong demand growth until the second half of next year. Depending on how this stuff unfolds. And
that brings me to a thought that I have. Just talking to some people that I know in the home side, the real estate sector, the financial sector, some friends of mine that I think are pretty smart. they pointed out to me that the current home buy, the untapped home buying group is the largest in history, bigger than the boomers, between Generation Y and the millennials, and I don't know, whatever you call these other generations below us, but there's a whole bunch of untapped demand for housing going forward, right? And we've underbuilt the market for 16 years in a row now, and that the interest rate reductions, let's assume that they're going to happen, because I think they will. I think most people think they will. That's going to open up some more demand in the first half of next year, because that's when the people are going to have to start building them, right? If you really think the second half of the year is going to be better, well, if you're a builder, you're going to have to start working on that, starting on January 1st, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves. So I also think that will cure some of the Home Depot, Lowe's malaise, I guess, if you want to call it that, because people are, they'll have a lower balance sheet, lower credit, problems to deal with the lower interest rates. It's going to help free up some of their discretionary income.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the first half of next year could be a lot better than people think.
Greg, thoughts?
I don't know that you can make any projections, budget, thoughts about the first half of next year at this juncture, just given the fact, Matt, and you've talked about this, hey, we get an election and there's so much stuff going on with that could change the landscape. Some of it positive, some of it negative, until you know that, like, any thoughts about what next year are going to be, I think, I just don't know how you do that. I mean,
I do it because my name is Matt Beamer and I make all kinds of outlandish predictions over the year. That's what we get paid for, buddy.
Hey, so let's talk.
Like, I did that and I was completely apolitical on how I did that, right? I mean, I was on my best behavior, wasn't I, Ash?
Yeah, I mean, you're excited about everybody getting $25,000, right, to buy a house.
I mean, the silliness of the competition for vote buying and the shamelessness of, like, I will say anything if I think that you're going to vote for me, by the politicians never ceases to amaze me. Oh, yeah, that's right. And the stupidity of the people that listen to it and actually, like, believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in Canada, though, right, Russ?
Never.
I think we're old enough
Actually, I thought, your comment about Elon Musk's response to the what's the right?
Oh, yeah, somebody asked him if he had given a Cybertruck to a Russian general, and he used the R word. He asked the guy if he was,
you can't say that on this podcast.
If he was mentally challenged.
It's the word out of The Hangover.
Yeah,
it's retard.
Yeah, it was. But so real quick,
very appropriate response.
If you are a buyer of lumber somewhere in the chain right now, sitting somewhere in there, why should you buy? But Greg, you basically said keep buying like you're buying right now, and which is great for people like us because we can keep sending. We're finally getting paid for having trucks on the ground, right? And getting paid pretty well for being able to do that and taking that risk well enough. At least we are the last 2 weeks instead of the last 4 months where we weren't.
Ash, the guy asked me, he goes, "Hey, are you busy?" I said, "You know what? We're busy every day. We're busy every week. The difference is from a few months ago when we were busy is, we were busy then losing money.
Yeah, great point.
Now we're busy making money."
Did you buy more lumber than you sold today, or we finally sell more?
It's close. It's close.
Man, I got to put a Post-it note on his desk. Sell more than you buy.
I mean, it's like marginally more.
You guys crack me up.
I'm giving you a hard time.
This is why I like dealing with you guys, because you're like flying all over the damn place. Strategy? What's that?
The question: if you are a buyer, when you talk to your buyers, so had a guy talk to you.
I'm entering POs right now, Matt.
Trying to sell a car to him, and he goes, should I buy? What do you think the rail strike's going to do? I'm like, well, I'm not really looking at that. How's your business? like when I hear everything that Russ said about going forward with the duty with curtailments potentially more, I just see a slow trickle up right now, right? That's why if you asked me what inning we were in, I would say we're in the third inning with two really good pitchers.
Absolutely.
That's
Third inning.
but
We're in the third inning.
I have it written down third inning with two good pitchers. So
That's it.
could be fast, right?
You know, if I didn't know anything, you'd be sitting. I think you'd sitting in the office next to me.
Yeah, well, maybe I saw you write it down on HD camera here. What so what do you Matt, Greg, what are you telling your customers when they say, should I buy something from you today?
Yes. Yes.
I have no problem selling people lumber, even if I've raised my price 20 or 30 or $40 on an item, because it's still well below where it was 4 or 5 months ago, right? So
Yeah.
we haven't even recaptured the average price of lumber from the first half of 2024, and we're just getting back into barely profitable levels at this point. It's a tenuous market. Mills are showing you their soft underbelly. They're crying uncle. And so this is a time where you really want to cozy up to the sawmills that have got you this far in the dance, and thank them for
Yeah.
letting you take part in their business, and having a partnership and all those things, because they're going to pay more attention if the market remains underproduced here for any length of time. Then you'll be happy that you have those relationships, right? As a buyer.
There's only going to be less lumber available between now and the end of year. It's a question about how much less. Is it going to be more? Is it going to be less than what people think it's going to be? Or is it going to be less than that?
Russ, are we producing one less stick than we're consuming yet or not? Or is it a half a stick?
It's well, if I look at the data, I mean, U.S. production, for example, year to date, I think that's only 5 months of data. It's down 1.4%, and consumption is down, which is calculated 1.1%. So it's still a bit of a slow burn.
Yeah.
There as well. So yeah, we are kind of trying to. I think consumption, according to Home Depot and Lowe's, is more like negative, 4%. So in the R&R anyway. So yeah, we're kind of in a delicate balance where we still, I think, need to keep that production off the market. I got about 1 billion board feet of reductions just on 4 companies, the 4 big companies, and that's mainly Q3 and some Q4.
Yeah.
And as you say, annualizing that, that's 2 billion or more, probably, because some of that's all in Q3. So it's more than 2 billion right there, and plus all the other companies. So yeah, you talked about 4 billion board feet of annualized reductions, and that's going to have a big balance, I think, impact on the market too.
I mean, history says we usually always overcorrect, right?
Yep.
I mean,
that's right.
It's kind of like Milton Friedman said about money supply. There's a long and variable lag, and that's what we're dealing with.
Let's go through our marry, date, or dump segment real quick. Matt, kudos to you. Good call on the 2x4 16s. Those things made a really good move in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks. What? Yeah. So because we're going to lead you off with it if you got
What's
something.
my next thing that I want to marry?
Yeah.
I would say that I think because of here's a general thought, the tariffs, the increase in the rate that Canadians are paying to move their lumber across the border gives them a reason to find other markets for low grade lumber. So if you're gonna pay a tariff on a shipment across the border, you don't want that tax to be like 12% of the value of the car of lumber, right? So
Yeah.
you don't want to ship economy for $160 FOB mill and pay a 14% tax. You'd rather ship some premium 16s or some MSR 2400, something with some real meat on the bone, and you can give up some of that 14% and absorb it. So I just feel like in general, low grade coming out of Canada and all the derivatives of low grade coming out of Canada are going to tighten up, and I would like to marry some of those items that I'm aware of. The date part of the market is I'm still a buyer of cheap 2x4 92 5/8 and 104 and 5/8.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to marry them because there's plenty of them around, but I definitely want to date them. And I know right now the mills are still motivated to sell them, so that's always a good item to trade when you have some interest in an item that's slightly undervalued and the mills want to keep selling it. That's a good trading philosophy in general to find those items, right? And then the stuff that I want to dump, the 2x6 2 and better lumber has gotten pretty proud. I'd rather just sell it at this point than buy it. I don't want to dump it because I don't really have a lot of 2x6 bought that I want to dump. But if I had 2x6 in my inventory and somebody called me asking for 2x6 and they counted me $20 on a truck or two, and they're buying an even mix of random, I'd just take it. I would just sell it. I just think that big premium for 2x6 is probably going to be a target here over the next 45 days for sawmills. So that's something I'd be cognizant of. Then I'll turn it over to you guys.
Greg, I'll let you go because I don't steal your items here.
So we kind of went out and said, hey, marry 2x4 16s across the board. They're incredibly undervalued. It's like basis is amazing when you like have a little bit of patience and you work through it. I mean, as you know, that we were taking orders, cheap orders on 2x4 16s, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. I mean, I don't know, maybe the other day too. But we kept replacing it, right? We were losing a lot of money on the stuff we were selling, but we said, hey, we got to stay with that trade. We want to turn our inventory. If you think back 5 weeks ago, 2x4 16s were trading in the mid-low 400s, right? And September futures was right here, right? You fast forward here late now, and we're saying, hey, 2x4 16s are trading in the mid-low 500s, maybe the mid-medium 500s, and September futures is the exact same price. You've had about I'm going to say $80, maybe $80 move and change in the basis in the last 5 weeks of that undervalued item. So you're saying, Greg, well, what's really undervalued right now? Well, you know what? You have an opportunity to tune in for our extra special consulting agreement that we're going to be launching. Ashley's making a whole password protected website where we're going to give people the opportunity. Anybody watch the options traders on CNBC? Trade with the big boys.
We got to get a ponytail then.
What's that?
We're going to have to get ponytails. You talking about the Nigerians?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Nigerian brothers. Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's just, no matter what the market is, there's always these opportunities that present themselves. I'm of the opinion that over the next 60, you can probably still get in the trade if you want to sell November. It's still like quote unquote doable, but it's just nowhere near as good as it was 2, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago. Frankly, it's probably just about as good as it was when I started doing it in April. Too soon.
Greg, you're an early adopter.
Yeah, well, you have, if you're not early, you're late, Matt. If you're not early, you're late.
So what's your date and dump, or what's your?
Well, I'm not. When I come on the show and say I'm dumping everything, that's not good. That
means you're retiring.
I'm not dumping anything. I'm still in the market. If I'm saying it's a third inning, there's still a long way to go.
So my Mary is anything 2x4 that's cheap right now. Maybe 2x4 12s, a few other items. Just because we talked about this before. 2x4 is the cheapest item out there, and it's kind of just getting dragged along. And now it's starting to move a little bit. And like dating, I'm going to still date MSR and a few other stud items because they got liquidity. Dump, man. I like just whatever we have. We didn't build a huge position, but 2x6. Anything, even 2x6 studs, we're just $100 premium to 2x4 studs with the same trim, right?
Yeah.
So I think we want to get rid of that. And I need to get rid of those 12-foot no grade stamp trucks we still have sitting down in the Cape that.
Well, we got more. We got more coming in this weekend, Ash. We got more.
So Matt, you took care of your 12s. We've not taken care of ours yet. 16s, no problem selling. 12-footers, can't get them moved.
Why don't you just tie them together and say, here, I'll sell you some 16s, but you got to take a truck of 12s. Use your leverage, buddy. Come on.
we put a whole list out of that, a half a truck of that and a half truck of 2x6 16s. And I asked Greg, we took a bet of who would be the first person to call and say if they could just buy the 16s.
Yeah, people don't buy that way. You know.
Well, look at that's
selling people what they want to buy. Not.
I want to ask Russ.
Not doing that.
So, Russ, what is the Global Wood Summit? You and a partner are behind this, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And what is it? What is your goal after the summit's over? What are the types of comments you're hoping to hear, and what is your goal for the entire event?
That's a good question. I mean, we do surveys. We've done surveys every year for our conference, and so we kind of know what people like about the conference, what they don't like, and they just all want to get informed about what different people's comments. They really like the question periods because they get to ask their own questions. You know, we'll be able to pop up their own questions on using Pigeonhole or something like that, and then they can get their question answered, or they go visit the speakers afterwards. And so it's just trying to get a bit of a feel of an overall rating of how things are going. I mean, you never know exactly what you're going to get, but it's really trying to get an overall perspective on what's going on in the global wood markets and trying to bring it back to your business. And trying to get it's almost like a bit of a review of a business plan. Do you think you're going to do better or worse than what you thought going into the conference? That sort of thing.
Matt, this is your first time going up there, right? To one of Russ's conferences. I
Yes.
think it's just to paint the visual for people that have never been to one. I got the opportunity to go to one of your conferences, Russ, a few years back when I was with Coke. And first of all, Vancouver is an amazing city. But secondly, like the venue that you hold it at is first freaking class. And I don't think people realize how many people attend your events and the level of people that attend your events and the ability to network at your events. If you're in this global wood industry, it's kind of a no-brainer to go.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd say it's the networking part of it that a lot of people really go there because we try and bring in a lot of the suppliers from around the world, and that brings some of the customers in. And so then we have a lot of separate meetings going on as well as buyers and sellers get to meet each other. And then people meet new players along the way as well. But I was just going to say, last comment, I want to marry something. And I want to marry the Lumber Word live in Vancouver at the end of October at the Global Word Summit. That's what I want to marry.
Oh man, that just made my chest puff up.
We've already got the date for that set, so we're already
We got to end
we're
right.
already done.
On that
You know,
one.
one of the things I'm really excited about being up there in Vancouver is, the breadth of information that we're going to get about what goes on in the rest of the world and how that can potentially impact our market. We get really, really provincial, and we're just like North American centric. And I mean, this is going to be historically, when I have gone to things of this nature, I always come back so much wiser and, humbled by how little I know.
Yeah, good point. And the one complaint that we get every year is always too much information. It was just too much. I couldn't absorb it all. And that's why we give them the slides and the presentation. They can go back and look at it at their own time. But it's a lot of information, and you learn a lot.
I'm going to go Frank Zappa on that and just say too much is just enough.
That's all. Russ, man, thank you for the compliment. We're looking forward to it. And I know Matt, Greg, and I are, and we hope we'll do a great job for you.
Russ, always great. We'll look forward to seeing you in a few months up there, okay?
Yeah, likewise. Right. Look forward to it.
Guys.
Russ, that was really nice of you to give us a shout out. I appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Okay, guys. Thanks.
Well, that'll conclude the show, and we appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.